Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 32, Episode 9. Coming up on the show, we've got the hitchhiking demon cloud, the shadow-stealing jellyman, and the mysterious origins of the Cherokee. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
You've gotten very caught up in this, I think, this origins of the Cherokee. It came about because on the Plus show, we were talking about Luis Elizondo's latest book, Imminent.
Can you blame me?
It was weird. Well, highlight, what it is. It's basically, is it like 90% of people that are involved in UFO research or the intelligence community or contact?
Here's the quote. Again, on Tuesday's Plus show, we were covering Imminent, Luis Elizondo's new book, which is quite good. And he was discussing his work with ATIP, the UFO research, government-funded, Pentagon-funded UFO research program. And he was talking about their work with Gary Nolan, the immunologist from Stanford. And a member of his team had gathered reports of military personnel who either had remote viewing abilities.
That's it, yes.
Or had been injured or had an encounter with a UAP, aka a UFO. And then he drops this quote. Most interesting to me, he said, was Will and Gary's discovery of the connection to indigenous people of North America. It turned out that almost all the people in Will's studies, military and intelligence officials with remote viewing abilities and/or UAP encounters and biological effects, had Native American DNA, specifically Cherokee blood.
Now,
What? To add to this, he says even more surprising, when they were talking about this amongst the, in the office, in the Pentagon with the program, everyone who was involved with ATIP had this background as well. He said, I did, Jay did, Hal Puthoff did, John Robert did, and others as well. We all had Cherokee blood. What?
Well, it did occur to me afterwards, and a couple of people pointed this out to me on Twitter, and I thought, okay, this is a good point. Without disrespecting anyone, is there a possibility that these people that are having these encounters, like it's so widespread that someone goes without anything to back it up, oh, I've got Cherokee background?
Yeah.
Is that what people are doing?
A bunch of people pointed this out, that they were having a laugh that we weren't familiar with this trope. I mean, we have a similar trope here in Australia. It's that people have Aboriginal blood. But I guess in the United States,
nothing to back it up.
Yeah, in the United States, every white person says, well, actually, my grandfather was half Cherokee.
Do they?
Apparently, yeah, that's what people are telling us. Everyone's got some Cherokee in them.
But I'd imagine in this circumstance, were they not doing DNA analysis? So they actually would have...
No, they're actually doing DNA analysis.
Yeah.
That was the whole point
of
working with Gary Nolan.
But then is it suggesting that that trope is actually true, that just so many people have Cherokee DNA, or is it that...
No, it's not true. I looked it up. It's barely 1.5% of the US population has Cherokee origins, Cherokee DNA.
So then we come back to this again.
Yeah.
Why is it that all these people that are involved in UFO encounters and biological effects have Cherokee backgrounds?
What is going on? I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then Chelsea, who follows me on X, said, hey, I was listening to this Plus episode and the piece about the Cherokee. She said, it's crazy, but there is controversy about how Cherokee and Ashkenazi Jewish DNA is related, and it has similar haplogroups. She says, look, I'm going to massacre the info, but they share DNA somehow. It's wild. So I started to investigate it. This is what I've been doing all day, is looking into this wild conspiracy. I found comments like this. This is a user on Reddit who said, look, I'm part Cherokee. There's something different about the Cherokees than any other Native American tribe. They were so much more advanced than any others. Before I had any knowledge of the church, and I think this was from a Mormon subreddit, I received multiple spiritual impressions that I had Jewish blood in me, which would almost seem psychotic at the time, but it just made sense with Cherokee traditions and whatnot. Those spiritual impressions are what led me to the church, they said. So this led me down a rabbit hole of epic proportions.
But hang on, so is he suggesting there, if I read into it, that somehow he had because he's part Cherokee, he had some type of spiritual intuition that he had Jewish blood inside him?
Yeah, I don't know what the intuition was.
Is that what he's saying?
I don't know. Maybe he...
I could start with so many stereotypes.
Yeah.
Don't.
So get your mezuzahs out. We're going to go into a deep Jewish rabbit hole and emerge on the other end and try and answer this question of why these military personnel who have had encounters with UFOs, and I must say Elizondo in his book included many, he didn't include the details, but he referred to personnel and even members of the ATIP program who had come close to UFOs and got extremely sick, life-threatening injuries and medical conditions due to this exposure. But out of all these people, they're all Cherokee.
Well, it suggests
Why?
to me, well, I mean, at very a surface level, they're being targeted as a reason for like whether they're more receptive to it. Maybe there's something about the neurological makeup induced by their DNA which allows them to be. And we spoke about this on that last episode about there being an antenna of some kind that's basically tuned to that particular phenomena, which is why some people may see certain things while other people see nothing at all.
And we have discussed this a lot over the years. There seems to be this pattern of bloodlines associated
Absolutely.
with these encounters. Just being involved with a military family is usually a precursor to some of this activity. There seems to be a high prevalence of that. But I tried to get into the mystery of this. I tried to dig out its roots and find out what was going on. I made it somewhere. And we're going to find out on this episode where I ended up. So what have you got coming up?
I like the rather ambiguous somewhere there. I don't know where this is going to end, but we'll see. Okay, well, later in the show, I want to go into some just really bizarre encounters. I started off this by going into looking at stories about strange encounters people had had with ghosts in remote locations. Because normally when you have an encounter with a ghost, you know, it's very cliche. You know, you'll have an encounter with a ghost in a creepy old house, for example, or, you know, maybe a hotel room or
Just
an
see
old ship.
a head floating past.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. You know, that happens all the time.
Cliche.
And look, it's cliche, but for the person having the experience at the time, it's incredibly distressing, sometimes exciting. You know, it's something that's
Like if you saw a ghost hauling chains in a pub in England, you'd be like, please,
just like,
this is so contrived. Get some originality.
yeah, if I didn't want to finish my drink, I'd throw it at it. You know, that's the kind of thing that I do. No, like this is more locations of where people are, you know, in extreme environments like the Himalayas, for example, where they have encounters with these apparitions that sometimes it falls into the third man effect, but it's more likely along the lines of the traditions of the hungry ghost. It's like these spirits that are trapped in these locations. So I jumped off from that, and I'll tell you some of those stories. And then I dived into I went down this rabbit hole of bizarre stories, including strange Christmas tree jelly men that are vibrating on people's beds, strange tree ghosts that are appearing. A lot of it I started digging into because it came from Richard Freeman's book that you were looking into a couple of weeks ago, Ben.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, really, really great. So I grabbed a hold of that book and I looked at some of his references there. There was one story in there which was just like, oh dear God. And I will only mention it in plus. But let me just say it involves some terrible crime.
Just read the title of the story.
Well, the title was, because I don't have it because I ended up writing my other notes, but it's something on the lines of The Hippo-Headed Rape Man.
The hippo-headed rapist, I think it was.
Yeah.
It was like a half hippo man who got up to some shenanigans.
Very much some shenanigans. And it's a great example as well of where it's not just UFOs. Like people go, oh, UFOs never hurt people. It's like, oh, ghosts never hurt. They do all the time.
It's the hippo men too.
Well, I mean, it may turn out that it may have been an excuse. But we'll get into that in the plus extension. That and more crazy stories, including shadow stealers. It's a kind of type of story I've never heard before. All of that is coming up in our plus extension later on.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to telling you what I uncovered with this weird Cherokee stuff. So one of the first places I ended up, because I kept seeing these threads referencing some DNA studies, and I found this website. It's called accessgenealogy.com, and they've got this article from Dennis on Cherokee DNA back from 2023. And I was going through this, just looking at this research. They discuss how several commercial DNA labs for years have been trying to identify a pattern of DNA markers that would prove Cherokee ancestry. Now, the reason for this is akin to that trope that we just heard, that perhaps over 1 million Americans claim Cherokee ancestry, and there is in fact big money in people who think that their great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess. So another Plus listener had a laugh about this, and yeah, this trope is apparently true. But as DNA tests became more sophisticated, you know, we've got 23andMe and all these companies that offer to give you this accurate
Well,
genealogy.
like Ancestry.com does it as well now, I think.
All these people started doing this to check their Cherokee ancestry. And it's a typical story. It's always, the cousin or the grandfather or grandmother has some Cherokee blood, and they would do these DNA tests. But the results they were getting back were Jewish. They were getting back Semitic or Middle Eastern DNA, but often no mention of Native American DNA.
So what, are you saying that there was some story that had been going through their family that they had like Cherokee ancestry, and then when they tested it, it showed up that it was Middle Eastern DNA?
Yeah, or Jewish.
Jewish DNA.
Semitic, yeah. The test subjects originally thought they had been defrauded, so they thought the company was lying. They knew that they had Cherokee ancestors. In many of these cases, these people were on the tribal rolls. They were registered as part of the tribe. So in 2008, the company DNA Consultants, Inc. initiated a comprehensive DNA testing of the Cherokees living on the Koala Reservation. This is in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And they were chosen because after 180 years in the West, the Oklahoma Cherokees, that they're considered so mixed that doing any DNA study on them is basically worthless. So the lab, they do all these studies on these Cherokee people, and immediately it's like a hornet's nest of controversy because that Cherokee princess, they write in the article, in someone's genealogy was most likely a Middle Eastern or even North African princess. Its scientists labeled the Cherokees not as Native Americans, but as Middle Eastern North African of origin. The implication is that they are indeed the 10 lost tribes of Israel.
What?
Yeah, so I don't know a lot about the whole 10 lost tribes history. The general gist is that when King Solomon during the reign of King Solomon, ancient Israel split into northern and southern. This was around 930 BCE. So there was the northern kingdom of Israel and there was the southern kingdom of Judah. So the 10 lost tribes refers to tribes that made up the northern kingdom, and they went on a mass migration, a mass travel. So there's all sorts of speculation on like people in Pakistan that might be the lost tribe, or people in Turkey that might be or people in Ethiopia might be one of the lost tribes. But that's not what I'm going to go into. DNA Consultants have tested a much larger population on the North Carolina reservation and got similar results. So other companies have done this and got similar results.
So it's not contamination or inaccurate reporting or anything like that. Like it's demonstrating that it's not consistent with what we expected, but it's accurate.
From my understanding of Native American DNA testing, what they're looking for is there's a particular, I can't remember the haplogroup or whatever it's called, but it's Asian. It's like an East Asian group.
Mm-hmm.
But these people had none of that. The Cherokees seem to be the people that Brent Kennedy thought the Melungeons were. And I'm like, okay, here we go. First drop in the rabbit hole. Who's Brent Kennedy and who are these Melungeons? So I started to look into this guy. So the word Melungeon, it's spelled Melungeons. It dates back to the late 1700s. The general implication, the meaning of it is blended, mixed. Others believe there's a Turkish origin which is connected to jinn, like Melungeon, and it means they're like cursed, hidden from sight. But it most likely is like mixed people. And so this Dr. Brent Kennedy, the guy you see on the left there, he was an intellectual. He's from Southwest Virginia. He was one of these people. He was part of the Melungeons. It was always considered, from his family, they were Melungeons.
So are they ostracized?
They're considered part of Cherokee heritage. And this is where I don't want to get bogged down in this, but there is this history of basically the way I can surmise it in a nutshell is the Cherokee is, in a sense, the British came in and wanted to fight the French. So they grabbed all these people north of a particular area and said, all right, you're one big tribe now. Help us fight the French. Now, some of those were Cherokee, some of them were these Melungeon people, some of them were other people, but they basically, over time, they all got the label Cherokee. So that's one of the first clues as to why you're getting all these wild DNA results, right? But he assumed that the physical traits of his family were had this peculiar nature to them. Like, obviously, he doesn't look he doesn't look Native American, right? He just looks like a European.
But he's dark, so maybe that's part of it.
He had a health crisis in 1988 when he was living in Atlanta, and he thought he had maybe some weird fever or Lyme disease, so he got checked into the hospital. And the doctors in Atlanta diagnosed him with a particular disease that only occurs in Mediterranean cultures.
Oh.
So he's like, that's strange. I thought I had this Melungian ancestry. And in his book, he goes into how he could trace his ancestry back like hundreds of years. The family hadn't really moved. They were all from this area. And he started searching the heritage, and that's when he learnt that he was part of these Melungian people. He had always thought that they were Cherokee.
Right.
Now, for the next 8 years, he became obsessed with this, and he started to map out the genealogy of his family. And all the academics he tried to approach told him to piss off.
And why is that?
They didn't want to touch it because all this stuff is so controversial. No one wants anything to do with it. The only exception was this Jefferson Chapman, the director of anthropology at the University of Tennessee. He helped him out, and they did a bunch of DNA studies. Anyway, he releases this book you see on the right, and the Melungians.
The Resurrection of a Proud People.
Yeah, so he estimates this population was around 2,000 people in the 1700s, and it had grown to about 250,000 in the 20th century. But he found evidence that the Melungian people clearly were connected to Turks. They had an origin going back to Armenians and Albanians. And part of the evidence he included in the book was all these photos of people who were considered like Cherokee, but they did not look Cherokee. Like, that's the cover of the book there. That guy kind of looks Turkish,
European,
right? He looks Turkish. And then going through, honestly, most of the photos to me just look like hill people. There's some pretty manky looking people in here. Like, I don't know what's going on with Mary Collins. This guy's pretty brutal, Brandy Jack.
No, but he's got more of I suppose, Cherokee kind of look about him. Not that I guess people can have attributes that make them look a certain way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have a particular ancestry.
There's a fatty here with a bottle of moonshine.
Oh, that's where the hill people comes from.
So, yeah, I mean, that was the main criticism of his work, is that, hey, you can't just show all these photos of people and make these claims.
Right. Well, also, though, wouldn't this, I mean, obviously this would be highly controversial because from what you're saying with the timing there, wouldn't that suggest that these people came to America before Columbus?
Yeah, that's the controversial thing, is that the admixture must have come before the 15th century. And
15th century.
Yeah. So he took a trip to Turkey and he authored a subsequent book. It was called From Anatolia to Appalachia. And the Turks really warmly received it because they could see the resemblance in the photos and they thought his research was sound. But the Arab extremists were like, "You're CIA, we don't believe you." Like it was some kind of CIA plot to make this connection, or that he was working for Israel.
Was he arrested?
No, he came back to America. The funny thing, when he came back to America and went back to the Appalachian, is that the locals hated that he was making these connections with other racists, like other races, and thought, screw you as well. So no one really liked him.
So it's between a rock and a hard place.
But it brought up all this interesting information. Like the Turks, there were some Turkish researchers who made this connection as well. Like if you look at the Creek battle flag, it's got the crescent moon. Mm-hmm. And so there were these suggestions, and there's all sorts of researchers in the Muslim world that believe that there were Native American Muslims in the 1300s in America. And so the Muslims beat Columbus to the Americas is basically what they're claiming.
But what are they basing that on? Is that records describing seafaring or something?
Things like, there are some descriptions in some ancient sources that refer to the continent to the west.
So would the American Indians, particularly the Cherokee, would they find this to be unpleasant? Is it something that they don't want discussed?
The who, sorry?
The Cherokee. Would they not want...
Well, obviously, it's controversial. I mean, it's extremely controversial because they're meant to be Native Americans, and there's a well-established understanding of the history of where they came from, coming over the land bridge near Siberia and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, back to the DNA study. The Cherokees tested had high levels of DNA test markers associated with the Berbers, native Egyptians, Turks, Lebanese, Hebrews, and Mesopotamians. Genetically, they are more Jewish than the typical American Jew of European ancestry.
What?
That was the result of these DNA studies. These Cherokee individuals are more Jewish than the rest of the Jews in America.
That's incredible.
The so-called
If true,
full-blooded
that's incredible.
Cherokees had high levels of European DNA and a trace of Asiatic Native American DNA. So they did have some Native American DNA, but some card-carrying Cherokees who were like in the tribe, participated in the culture, had zero connection to Native American DNA. There was absolutely nothing at all. The lab claims that their skin color and facial features are primarily Semitic in origin, not Native American. So clearly you can see why this would be controversial. So there's this weird connection in this article that they go into with the language as well, which opened up the research I did this afternoon. The Cherokee word for nation is Ani. It also means province or clan. And this is also the name of a medieval capital of Armenia, one of the strongest cities. And the word Ani in Christian Eastern Anatolia meant nation.
Oh,
It's the same word for nation from this region that the DNA is showing that they come from. They also add that Armenia was the first Christian nation in the world. It was conquered by the Muslims in the Middle Ages during the 1500s. It was a bloody killing field as Muslim Turks and Muslim Persians fought over the region. In 1604, the Persians deported about 300,000 Christian Anatolians. They were forced to wander about the Mediterranean basin. So there's an idea that they somehow made it to the new continent, to the new world. And those people, they had a big mix, like big ethnic mix. Some of them were Greek, some of them were Jews, some of them were Egyptians, some of them were North Africans. So very similar to the DNA profile of the people I just showed you on the screen.
Mm.
And the word Anatolia literally means land of sunrise in Greek. And when British officials first asked the Cherokee leader, there's this famous Cherokee leader, his name was Ata Kula Kula. They said, "Where are your people from? Where are the Cherokee ancestors from?" This chief said, "Our ancestors came from the land of the sunrise." Again, this is the Greek word for Anatolia. The Cherokee chief's name was Atakulak Ula, which in Anatolian means rider of a roan-colored horse. So even his name was an Anatolian.
Mm.
So already this is opening up some really important questions about the origins of these people. And is this going to get us any closer to answering this question of their genetic link to UFO encounters? Is this going to help us solve it?
Well, I mean, right now I'm saying no, unless a UFO picked them up when they were kicked out of Persia and then dropped them off in the New World. Is that what the whole, like, the story about the crazy bears is? Because remember the story of the crazy bears? There's Native American legends that these strange moons would fly over, and from the moon would drop a crazy bear. And it'd essentially be a Bigfoot, like in modern terms, what we would describe as a Bigfoot.
Are you referencing an RD6 Killer Clark story?
No, well, maybe RD6 Killer Clark included it, but these stories have been around for a while, these crazy bears and these moons that would come over and drop them out. And there was even one story that perhaps Dr. RD6 Killer Clark actually referenced, which was describing that there was a Native American who would look after this guy that was in a cave. Like, it dropped out of a moon and it took up residence in a cave, and he would come along and give it food.
That's not what I'm going to be talking about.
Well, I didn't think so, but I was like, is that the connection?
No, that's not. No. Bigfoot being dropped out of a UFO?
Close.
An alluring hypothesis, not what I'll be going into. What I will be talking about is this book from Donald Yates. It's Old World, Roots of the Cherokee, How DNA, Ancient Alphabets, and Religion Explain the Origins of America's Largest Indian Nation. Now, I'll put him on the screen here. He's Cherokee. He looks more like what I would expect a modern Cherokee to look like. Like, he kind of looks half European, half Native American, right? And he writes very early on that, look, some legends say the Cherokee came from the west. Other legends say they came from the northeast. Still others say they came out of Mexico to the south. No one can agree if they came with other American Indians across the Bering Strait or from some other direction. Estimates of their first emergence as a people vary from tens of thousands of years ago to only 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So like I said,
it's very similar to what we have here.
A bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
Right? But do they have a creation story? He asked this very early on because you look at the Hopi have a creation story. You know, the Algonquins have a creation story. All these Native American tribes have a creation story. So do the Cherokee have a creation story? And it turns out they do. You see, the Cherokee had a form of writing. It's called the Sequoian syllabary. And without going into too much of the history, basically they formed together in 1880, and with the help of the American Baptist Mission Society, in Oklahoma, they formed a university, like a Cherokee University. At first it was called Indian University, then they changed the name to Bacone University. Anyway, Bacone University developed its own press, so they could make pamphlets, they could print a newspaper, and one of their earliest publications was this small pamphlet. It was called A Cherokee Vision of Elo, which translates to the Cherokee history of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So this was our origin story. It recounts the deposition of Sakia Sanders, who was apparently a member of this secret society within the Cherokee. They were known as the Katuwas in the 1890s.
Okay, so now that gets cooler, a secret society within the Cherokee.
And these were the elders who kept the, what's the word? They
oral
kept
traditions?
the oral traditions, the oral histories of the tribe. And so this document, it's written in Cherokee, because remember they had their own script, and on the following page it had the English translation. And it talks about the story of 12 original clans who came to North America across a large body of water, which can only be the Pacific Ocean. They migrate to escape overcrowding and frequent floods in the old country. And before leaving, the Cherokees, whom the document names the Eshelekee, build a store reaching to heaven, but this is destroyed by the gods. A store reaching to heaven that's destroyed by God. Tower of Babel, anyone? Sounds like the Tower of Babel. According to this secret society text, in the course of time, the old pathway which had been traveled by the clans was cut. It was broken by the submergence of a portion of the land into the deep sea.
So there was a land bridge at some point.
Either a land bridge, or it could suggest that they used islands to cross the Pacific Ocean.
Okay.
And some of these islands are not sunk, but obviously the sea level rose maybe at the end of the last ice age or something, and they lost that connection. For many years after establishing their new homes, the settlers searched for the missing clans. Unable to find them, they gave up and established a new system of 7 sacred clans to the tribe. From that day to this, they have been searching for the 5 lost clans of the Cherokee. Now, at some point in their wanderings, it's not exactly defined when, a black race of terrible invaders came in boats over the sea. And they described this war they had with these black invaders. The first wave is repulsed, and then there's a second wave. And by the 4th wave, the Cherokees discover what they call in this text the poison of the dragon. And this poison of the dragon destroyed their enemies. But whatever this weapon was, it was so powerful, it also left the land poisoned and unusable. The specific quote was, where was it? The land was contaminated and rendered unfit for habitation.
What could they be using?
What kind of ancient weapon, and we're talking thousands of years ago, could do that, could leave a land uninhabitable?
Well, I mean, immediately I started thinking, did they discover gunpowder? But gunpowder wouldn't leave the land uninhabitable.
Yeah. The only thing that comes to mind for me is like some kind of pollution or radiation. But now we're getting into some really extreme ideas.
Well, but if it was radiation, so maybe perhaps because there is, irradiated rock, obviously, that's why we mine it. But then that wouldn't be deadly instantaneously unless they'd somehow weaponized it to modern standard, which they couldn't have done.
But get this, they say that the land was so devastated by this weapon that the land sunk into the ocean.
Oh.
So now this is sounding
so it's
like
kinetic as well.
some bizarre Atlantis story. What is going on? Anyway, the rest of the text describes them having this peace after this, and then they describe the coming of white people. But they don't mean the 15th century. They don't mean...
So we're talking long in the past, aren't we?
Yeah. They start talking about white people coming, like waves of white people landing in North America way before 1492.
Probably fleeing Atlanteans.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we're going that far back. But the interesting thing that pops up is they're focusing on these 7 tribes, 7 this, 7 that. And it keeps coming up, the number 7. And the author points out really early on, what's his name again? Yates. Donald Yates. He points out that both the Hebrews and other ancient Mediterranean people count 7 days a week. And the Cherokee are actually unique in this, that they use this 7 days a week system. The other Native American tribes apparently don't. And yeah, he mentions the Tower of Heaven, which sounds like the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
And when he's talking about those black invaders, he says they don't seem to be describing Africans. They're describing dark-haired, maybe olive-skinned people who are coming.
So from the Middle East or the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean. They're coming in boats. They're arriving by sea. And once the last wave of invaders gain a foothold, the Cherokee, this is the white men, the Cherokee are ultimately driven to the seashore of the west coast, where they will cross the waters, landing in the old country from whence they came. So they're going back over the Pacific to try and find those lost stepping stones back to their homeland. They will there find the 5 lost clans before being reunited into 12 clans, into one people again. They will become the great nation of the Cherokee, of the half-sphere Temple of Light. What does that mean?
So again, this is getting very Atlantean. I know it's not, but the depictions are very similar.
Now, the Temple of Light has this word which is clearly foreign because the English side of the translation, they couldn't translate.
Right.
The word is Catius. It's Chatiyis. And the half-sphere Temple of Light, they describe this as, it's probably like a townhouse.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying it's a townhouse. But Yates is like, I don't know. We got to look at this word, Catius. He says almost letter for letter, it is Doric Greek.
Greek?
It's Greek. It's the standard Greek name for an assembly hall. These public buildings, he says, were often constructed in a circular shape to emphasize egalitarian principles. But what about this light? What about this Temple of Light? Well, the light mentioned could be the fire that they had in the middle of this temple. It's symbolic of some other great light. But what it could be symbolic of, and I found this interesting, is that there was an institution of the Dorian Greeks, this annual assembly they called the Apolli, and the Apolli was named after Apollo. And what is Apollo? Apollo is the god of light.
Oh. So is it also perhaps a depiction or I don't know what it would be, but basically, is it information? Is it like some trusted information or sacred information?
Well, the annual festival that the Greeks would have would be like a gathering to celebrate arts, to celebrate enlightenment under the god of light, Apollo. So it's intriguing that the Cherokee are saying the same thing. They're going to return to this round structure to follow the light. And the name they use is Greek. It's a specific type of Dorian Greek who worshipped Apollo, the god of light. It's a really strange connection. And so they keep using this word, a Cherokee, as well. This is another word that wasn't translated, a Cherokee. Now, you look at that word, you listen to it, just sounds like Cherokee, a Cherokee, same word, right? Well, a Cherokee, that's Greek too.
And what does it mean?
It's the same word as the Greek Atheloki. It's spelled like ETH, but the TH in Greek, you sound it as a sh sound. So it's literally a Cherokee. It's the same word. It means colonizer. It means settler. So you have these people who came from across this giant body of water from their homeland using islands that sunk as skipping stones, landed in this new land. They're literally called, the name of their tribe is the colonizers, the settlers.
So I guess...
And their very language, their history of their people refers to their homeland back across the ocean where they worshipped a god of light, which was worshipped by the Greeks, Apollo.
So is this suggesting that we have a group of people over generations, clearly, obviously it hasn't happened rapidly, that have moved through these nations, they've moved through Greece, and on their way through, they've picked up these legends and these stories which have formed part of their folklore?
Yeah, that's part of the understanding. There must have been a migration, and they're literally telling us this in their ancient stories. The other thing he points out is that the Cherokee language is really unique. It's linguistically alien to the other Native American languages. Like a Cherokee speaker, for example, has the same odds of being understood by a Mohawk speaker as a Russian has to being understood by a Vietnamese speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so different. And then he starts going through the Cherokee language and he starts questioning, is it Greek? Like, is it some form of Greek that's changed over time? So I'm going to put this image on the screen here and, I'll leave it up for a little bit so you can go through and compare some of these. On the left, we've got the Greek words and the meaning, and on the right, you've got the Cherokee words and the meaning. So for example, Karanos means chief in Greek and Karanu means chief in Cherokee. And you can go through and there is a ton that are really similar.
Like Dakos in Greek is a devouring beast or whale, but in Cherokee, Dakwa is a mythic great fish, which could be inferred to be a whale.
Yep. And yeah,
there's so many of them.
It's all blurry because I've been looking at a computer screen all day. But what's another one? Naka means contest and Anecha means ball play. It's pretty similar. Mona means way station in Greek, and Mona in Cherokee means a land where the tribe stayed for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just leave that up. Many of those are similar, and he makes a convincing argument for it in detail. But he says all the nouns, all the titles, all the religious terms, they look like a word that's evolved slightly over time.
It does, but, to our uneducated eyes and ears, is this a case of us looking at words that are kind of similar and going, oh, yeah, like they're similar? Or is it, you've had linguists and people, academics that have gone, yeah, the similarities are stunning?
Yeah, good question. He didn't provide any references that I included in my notes, but maybe I just missed them because I was trying to answer the UFO question, to be honest. But
it's still going to be crazy bears, I promise you.
The question is, what is this connection to Bronze Age Dorian Greeks with this American Indian tribe? Like, okay, where could they be from? But specifically, what location are we talking about? And he says that all the clues lead to Cyrene.
Cyrene?
Libya.
So Northern Africa.
I apologize for this horrible map.
Where did you get this from? In Carter 95?
Yeah, it's like the worst CD-ROM map I could find. But you can see like Egypt is there and you've got Libya on the left and Cyrene is right on the coast. So Cyrene was a Doric Greek-speaking colony of Sparta. So
wait, the Cherokee are Spartans?
The Cherokee Spartans? But hang on, they're finding all this Semitic DNA, so that's not making sense either. Here's I got Google Maps open here. Let's zoom in to Libya. And what do we find when we zoom in?
The Temple of Zeus.
The Temple of Zeus. The Cyrene Museum, the ancient city of Cyrene. So I'll zoom out. So yeah, that's Libya there. And then you've got, if we just go over here, we've got Alexandria just across the coast there. So they certainly would have had contact, obviously. So that's weird. Like, where is this going? Well, Cyrene was the Dorian Greeks' pride and glory. It was one of their greatest colonies. The Dorian Greeks of Libya held a monopoly in some very important items of the ancient world. One of them was apparently silphium, which is a now extinct pharmaceutical. This was used all across the Mediterranean. This is where they got it from.
What was it, an analgesic or something?
It was a hallucinogen, but it was used in all sorts of medicine, apparently. They vied with the Phoenicians as the merchants of the world. Are we getting some clues? The merchants of the world. Are you putting the dot? Are you connecting
I am.
the dots,
I'm just not
Aaron?
saying it. I am. I am. I'm immediately going to space lasers right now.
With a population of 135,000 people, Cyrenaica was home to one of the largest and most prosperous Jewish communities outside of ancient Israel. At this time, Jews were thoroughly Hellenized, so they had taken on a lot of the culture of the Greeks. They not only spoke Greek, they had adopted customs like the public baths and some of the sports, and even adopting some of the religion of Apollo into their customs. And 1/4 of this population of this city-state was Berbers, and the rest was this ethnic mix. And he says that historically, these Jewish merchants in this very diverse ethnic society did extremely well. Like, they did really well for themselves. Now, he says one of the interesting things about this ancient city of Cyrene in Libya, they have this structure that they used as a synagogue. And it's modeled after the amphitheater in Apollonia. And it's basically modeled to worship the sun god Apollo. And so the layout of it, the floor and the pillars, they're plastered white, and they do this ritual each year. And he says that that ancient ritual is identical to, well, the structure of this synagogue was identical to the Cherokees' national heptagon. So the Cherokees have this structure that they used for their chiefs and everything. It's the same design. It's the same structure. And he says the walls were colorfully painted just like the Cherokee assembly. The architecture with its drum-like roof, even the seating arrangement, exactly like the Cherokee layout. So our guys might be from here. You know, if you're living in the Appalachians and you're part of the Cherokee, you might be a Jew from ancient Libya.
So, but then, okay, so why did they leave? Is because that there was a collapse in that society at that time? Like, why did they leave? Why did they migrate?
Did they get kicked out?
Well, I'm not asking that, but why would they leave?
How on earth did they get from ancient Libya to America? Great question, Aaron. Great question. This leads us to this bloke.
Who is this?
He's like the Kiwi Rex Gilroy, but Harvard educated.
Oh.
He's a Harvard biology professor. His name's Barry Fell. And Baz was a Kiwi, and he spent a lot of his time researching a Greek admiral named Maui, this ancient Greek admiral named Maui. And you might hear that word Maui and go, isn't that the god from Moana?
Well, it's Hawaiian. Is it an island or a location?
Yeah, isn't it? This guy, isn't this the god Maui with his big hook? Yeah, it's the same guy. Maui, the Polynesian demigod, was an ancient Greek admiral. And this guy, this Kiwi, Barry Fell, he was researching Maui because apparently Maui, on one of his great journeys, left inscriptions across Polynesia. He left inscriptions as far away as New Guinea, and Fell claims he even left inscriptions in a cave in Chile. Now, he asserts that Maui was a 3rd century BCE North African navigator, and he commanded a huge Libyan-Egyptian fleet. Now, his exploits are well preserved in Polynesian folklore, which is why we have the Disney film Moana with Maui in it. He's portrayed as a trickster, culture bearer, and there's all these connections between Polynesia and Mesopotamia and the rest of, that world. Like the Polynesian god Ra is the sun god, the Mesopotamian god is Ra. There's all these cross-cultural connections. There's a couple I'll show you on the screen. So one example is this is a Greek hoplite soldier. So he's got his shield, he's got his crest on his helmet. And the next image I'll show you is a Mississippian era warrior from Alabama.
Yeah. similar features.
Pretty much the same design of the plumed helmet. Same thing. Yeah, if you were listening, to the audio, yeah, there's a lot of images in this show.
But I mean, that as well could just simply be that it's like cultures.
Just a coincidence, is it?
It's a good idea to put a crest on your head. You don't put it that way. You put it that way.
What do you mean? It's a good idea. What do you mean? It's a good idea to put a crest on your head?
When you're creating things that are intimidating, like when you create something that is intimidating in war or in battle, you want to make yourself look larger. So to put a crest above your head is something that would just make sense.
Good point. But it is. I do agree with you. But it is a very unique design.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I'll give you that.
And there's more than just.
But are there more? Yeah, exactly. If there are more, connections or more similarities, well, then that would suggest that there is something else occurring here.
So this one on the screen here is a sketch of an ancient Cherokee warrior, and this is from pottery or something. This isn't just like a squiggle. This is from an ancient pottery or cave or something. I can't remember the source. But yeah, that's a Cherokee warrior, and this is an ancient Hawaiian warrior.
Yeah, okay.
So you got all these connections across Polynesia that connect the ancient Spartan colony to the New World.
So is this though then implying that the Spartans or this colony left this area of the world in Libya and Egypt, but then they didn't go directly to the United States, which what we consider now to be the United States, the Americas. They traveled all around the world.
Yeah, well, this is what Fell started to research, the guy from Harvard, the New Zealander. He was interested in the origins of Maui because New Zealand has the Maoris.
Yes.
And it's basically the same word, the ancient settlers from his native land. He came across cave drawings in Western New Guinea, which he connected with an inscription in a cave in Santiago in Chile.
How remarkable.
After spending 8 years going through ancient texts in the Harvard Library, he was finally able to decipher that inscription in Chile as an example of standard Libyan. It was a dialect of Egyptian spoken by the brown-skinned fisher folk who the Greeks called Maori, aka the Moors, aka the Maori of New Zealand. There were hundreds of similar inscriptions scattered throughout the Pacific. So Fell started to reconstruct this journey based on these inscriptions and where they were. So basically, in a nutshell, he discovered that a Libyan fleet was dispatched between 235 and 225 BCE.
Okay.
They were sent under the auspices of Eratosthenes, the director of the Library of Alexandria.
Mm-hmm.
So this deep Egyptian connection. They were sponsored, so paid for, by the Egyptian pharaoh, and they had a very specific mission to circumnavigate the world. The admiral in charge of this fleet was Maui. So there's more that goes on from this. Like there's a Berkeley geographer, George Carter. He ended up translating this inscription in that cave in Santiago. And he said it basically said southern limit of the coast reached by, Admiral Maui. To this southern limit, he steered the flotilla of his ships. This land the navigator claims for the king of Egypt, for his queen, for their noble son, running a course of 4,000 miles, steep, mighty mountains on high uplifted, August, day 5, regal year 16. So it's basically a member of this fleet going, we were here, we proclaim this land for our king. And he's finding these all over the place. Remember, this is in Chile. They made it all the way from Alexandria to the Americas.
Are there any, I guess so much time has passed, so it would only, probably continue to exist in oral traditions. That's probably the only way. But are there any stone depictions anywhere that would link these places rather than zero? Okay.
Yes, and I'm going to show you some of those in a moment. The king or pharaoh that is referred to in this inscription is Ptolemy Euergetes III. His wife was the Empress Berenice, who was Cyrenaic, so she was from that Spartan colony. He ruled until 221 BCE. He subjugated Libya, but he had a huge kingdom. Like their power went as far as India, and he was apparently, allies with the king or the sultan of India. And So Fell concludes that Rata, Maui, and 300 or so other members of this expedition were the founding fathers of Polynesia. They became the Polynesians. And the expedition, yes, it had this purpose to circumnavigate, but it was probably, they took so many people because, hey, let's start a colony while we're at it. And so now we're starting to get a fuller picture of where the Cherokee may actually come from, how they got there, and what the purpose of this navigation was. Now, he says this is actually borne out in the DNA of Southeast Asia as well, even in Indonesia and New Guinea and Polynesia. He references one DNA study from New Guinea that kept on finding this haplogroup H, which is a European type, in the people of New Guinea. And it wasn't a modern admixture. It was clearly ancient. And so, yeah, why do New Guinean natives have this European DNA? The same study lists high frequencies of Middle Eastern and other European haplogroups, including Egyptian and some other North African groups in their DNA as well. So there are all these connections from New Guinea to Greek, Jewish, Libyan ancestors. So he ended up plotting out the route, and I'll put it up on the screen here so you can see where they started.
So they've come down through Africa. They've headed through the Indian Ocean, through the islands of Indochina, Java, Indonesia, up into Polynesia, through Hawaii, and then over to the United States or the Americas, and then back. Is that correct, where you come over?
Apparently they didn't make it all the way back. So they came from Hawaii, and then they made it to South America, and then went north. Well, they made it to like south of Mexico, and then came down the continent and tried to go back. But did they get stuck on Easter Island or something?
Well, that's such if you look, I mean, this picture doesn't do it justice, but if you look at that on a globe, you realize just how far that mass of water is.
Pathetic.
Well, I mean, think about seafaring in the 3rd century.
Hopeless people.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. So, yeah, but if it stopped there, although the thing is, how does he know it stopped there? Because that where the last, we were here shows up on an island somewhere in the...
I don't know. I can't remember.
Because where is that Tahiti or something?
I can't remember reading the details, but I remember reading at some stage he's like, yeah, the expedition, most of it didn't return.
That or record of it has disappeared.
There's this really intriguing detail about the technology they were using as well. So among the drawings, again, in a New Guinea cave, they found this drawing in New Guinea. There's this sketch on one of the walls in the cave. It's this thing. It looks like an ancient, like a god or some weird alien thing. You'd be thinking,
priest of some kind.
What is this? Is some kind of demigod? Like, what is this thing? Well, Fell started to research this, and he discovered that the Egyptians at the time had developed this device called a tanawa. It's the tanawa.
So it's for impressions?
It's a mechanical calculator. It studies planetary motions, and they were going to use it to determine the longitude of the Earth, really, the journey. And they ended up making based on ancient descriptions, they made a reconstruction of what this ancient machine would have looked like. And it looked like this.
Oh, wow.
Which is basically, for those of you listening to the audio...
It's the similarities are quite pronounced.
It's the same thing that was in a cave in New Guinea.
Mm.
It's the same machine. Like, what? Isn't that incredible?
Well, the thing is, once or twice you can go, it's a coincidence. This is more than a coincidence.
Now, this machine is called a tanawa, right? The Cherokee have a folk memory of this. They have the legend of the Tlanawa, the great hawk, which traveled across the ocean. Like it was able to travel the whole ocean. It's referencing the name of this ancient Egyptian machine. Isn't that incredible?
Truly is.
He says it's possible that the seacoast homeland of the Cherokee was subject to floods, and they mention water monsters and all sorts of floods and, like I mentioned earlier, things falling into the ocean from their ancient stories. Well, there's the Sunda Shelf, which is now gone, but it was a major part of Southeast Asia. It actually joined Indonesia and New Guinea. So if you look back at the map here and we zoom in here, we see all the islands there, like Java and all around there. That was one big landmass.
Right. But it's is it volcanic in that region? So there must have a lot of movement going on. Yeah.
I think so, but that's one of the major suggestions.
Oh, of course it is volcanic in that region.
Gunung, Padang, and all those ancient sites. There's a suggestion that there was a much larger civilization because the landmass, sorry, I should actually put it on the screen. The landmass there was huge, right? So most of that is now underwater. And remember, the Cherokee history was we stopped in this place and it was great, but then it sunk. It went underwater. So their legends...
that suggests that they must have stayed there for a while.
Yeah, they're legends. And he goes into the history of when this went underwater, which was 3600 BCE, but the flooding kept on going until 300 BCE, which is pretty much in line with when this Egyptian-Libyan journey took place. And then the Book of Hopi also talks about stepping stone islands that sunk into the sea when they emigrated as well.
Which is probably this region.
So it's probably the same region. And then you've got another source. So he mentions this Cherokee author, William Eubanks. He authored this book in the 1900s called The Red Race, Originators of the Ancient Apollo Worship. So here's this other connection to Apollo. He said, while the Cherokee is neither Greek, Hebrew, Egyptian, nor Hindu, he has in his language many words that are purely Greek or Hebrew or Egyptian. His ancient religious customs and rites bear a strong resemblance to the rites and religions and customs of the Jewish religion. His other name, which is also the name of the other tribes belonging to the Initiated Brotherhood, so this is that secret society I mentioned at the start, the Kituwas, that means light received from the sun. Apollo, the god of light. Again, they worshipped Apollo. So are you starting to see the picture? Is this all coming to fruition now?
Absolutely.
We're getting all this evidence adding up of where the Cherokee are actually from. And this then brings us to some of the intriguing elements, the intriguing artifacts that have been found in the Americas.
Oh, so this is the stone.
This is the Rocky Creek stone. This is 19 by 15 inches. It's engraved limestone. It was exhumed in 1870 in a mound in Mississippi. A Mississippian period mound, but it was emerged in Tennessee, someplace in Tennessee. It's now in the Tennessee Historical Society's possession. It's in a museum in Nashville.
And what's its significance?
Well, he claims it commemorates a peace treaty between the Cherokee, who had just arrived to this region, and the Shawnee. And they had a big war. And he said in 1715, they joined in an alliance. They smoked a peace pipe and they said, let's cool it. And they ended up fighting the Algonquins together. But the tablet, if we look at it, I'll go through his description. He says it shows us a Cherokee with a war club on the far left. So that's him there on the screen. He's got a war club. He's got a top knot and scarification marks across his face, which means he's probably a chief. He's got sun symbols on his skirt. And he's battling a Shawnee warrior, and we know that because of the mohawk hairdo. And he's got his serpent design on his shield, so that's clearly a Shawnee.
Pardon me.
And the two chiefs on the right, which are, see this one down the bottom? He's smoking a peace pipe, and there's one to the right of him. You see the Cherokee on the right? He's wearing that ancient Greek helmet. He's got the Cherokee hoplite helmet. He's got a hoplite helmet. And if the most interesting part in this, and this is the symbol of peace, if we zoom in, whoa! What's that?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Don't have a coughing fit. This is a coup de grace. He's gone. He's just left. You leave me here with the big reveal by myself. He's having a coughing fit. Can't handle the star. He's repelled by the Star of David.
That's not true at all.
He's like, whoa, get me out of here.
Don't you dare project that onto me. I've still got whatever you had, you gave to me, and I've still been nursing it. I'm like, I can get through a show, I'll be all right.
He sees the Star of David and he's like, I got to get out of here.
How do you know I'm not Jewish?
Are you Cherokee? Are you Cherokee? Have you been abducted by UFOs?
I'm not entirely sure. No, but like, I mean, a star, though, I mean, that's potentially reading into it a little.
No, this symbol doesn't appear anywhere else in Native American tribes.
So how
is unique?
Well, okay, here I'm showing my ignorance. How far back does the Star of David go?
Oh, like thousands, tens.
Oh, it does.
Well, I don't know, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So, but this is from the 18th century, right? So she's got the Star of David, and see how they're clasping hands, and there's this V thing connecting them that symbolizes the peace between the tribe, and they formed peace because these two got married.
Okay.
Right. So this is them getting married, and she's got a plaid kilt, which is like Middle Eastern style. Yeah, she's got the 6-pointed star on her breast, and they are now on the path of peace, which is symbolized by these 2 lines below them. So yeah, this is the Star of David, and he says, in my experience, no other type of star can be adduced from Indians in this time period. It is perfectly unique. And the skirt's pattern is a Greek pattern as well. And he goes into all these other examples which link to ancient Egyptian style or ancient Greek style. So, yeah, very intriguing image there. That is the, what's it called again? The Rocky Creek Stone. You can go see it in Tennessee if you...
How do we get from this to abductees and UFO experiences having Cherokee DNA?
Dude, that's the question I've been asking myself ever since that show on Tuesday. How does this all connect? Has Grundy cracked it?
Well, you cracked it a while ago, but this particular story, have you worked
Am I going to lead you right to the edge and then tell you it's coming up in PLOS? Am I going to do that to you?
Look, I'm a bit of an asshole, but I hope you do.
Well, I've got more examples. There's the Bat Creek Stone as well.
So what's this?
In the 1960s, Minna Renowich was working in her flower bed in Cedar Street in Georgia, Columbus, Georgia. She dug up a bronze coin. Actually, this is a different thing. She dug up a bronze coin. It had a Roman emperor on it.
Okay.
And the dating was around the same time that coincided with this journey from Egypt, right? So, but archaeologists look at those finds, like Egyptian coins found all over the world and Roman coins found all over the world.
Was it Egyptian coins that were found on a beach in the Northern Territory, like off Darwin?
Yeah,
here in Australia.
The way they explain it away, well, in that case in America, was, well, maybe someone was a collector and they had that coin and then they dropped it in the garden like 50 years ago, or someone planted it there. That's how they kind of
which is reasonable.
Brushed aside those finds.
It is brushing aside. It's reasonable, though, in the lack of any accompanying evidence. But in light of what you've been describing, it suggests that no, it's probably been there for a long time. Centuries.
The reason he brings up that example of the Roman coin is when you look at this stone I've got on the screen here, the Bat Creek Stone, you can't criticize it in the same way. So this is engraved with Hebrew, and it was exhumed in a mound containing the skeletons of an East Tennessee chief and 8 retainers, and it was dug up by the Smithsonian in 1889. So it's not just some random woman in her garden. This is the tributary. Bat Creek is a tributary in Cherokee country, right?
Okay.
So this is Cherokee land. Cyrus Thomas, who was the head of, and we've covered him with all the giant stuff in the past, but he was the head of the Smithsonian's Mound Survey Project. And he examined the stone. He, understood the custody of this and where it was from. And he believed that this inscription was Cherokee, because remember, they had their own script.
Yeah.
He published it upside down in 1894. And the stone was basically tossed in the back of the Smithsonian and forgotten about for ages. Until Cyrus Gordon from Brandeis University, he's going through the catalog one day and he finds this in the back of the Smithsonian. He's like, whoa! Because he can read Hebrew. And he realizes that this is an ancient Hebrew inscription dug up in Cherokee country in 1894.
And what does the inscription read?
It says, a phoenix for Judea. a phoenix for Judea. Now, this creates a storm of controversy. Anthropologists line up to say that it's a fake. There was even hit pieces as late as 2004 from academics against this. There was a Hugh McCulloch from Ohio State University who apparently debunked a lot of the debunkings. He pointed out that, like, he looks at I won't go into the details, but he looks at the details of the Hebrew and how it's carved. And one of the main criticisms was that, this is just someone's carved this in the 1800s and buried it because there was like Masonic something that had this same script and they copied it. But he actually pointed out that some of the details of the script are from like the 2nd century AD, and anything later, like it's basically, he points out that it's impossible that casual students in the 19th century would have known about this really ancient script. Now, discovered directly beneath this was the skull of a dignitary, and the comet for the Jews, this translation.
The phoenix.
Well, it can be translated as comet for the Jews or the phoenix of the Jews.
It's like are you suggesting a fire in the sky? Like a phoenix is a firebird, and a comet is in the sky as well.
It's a political message. Yeah, it's actually a political message. There was a revolt against Rome in 132 to 135 CE. This was the Jews trying to get sovereignty in ancient times. It was like a revolution led by Simeon bar Kokhba. His name means son of the star. And the warriors in this burial, it elaborates that whoever buried them must have been familiar with these ancient Jewish customs. And I'm trying to find all the details, but if you look at there's a tributary in Mississippi found in 1922 that reads in Hebrew, year 2 of the deliverance of Israel on the reverse of the inscription. So in a nutshell, there's all these like political slogans found in relation to this Jewish uprising against Rome from, what was it, 130 AD?
132, you say? Yeah.
It's like, what is that doing in America? How is that in Cherokee land? A tablet inscribed with an archaic version of the 10 Commandments in Hebrew was also found in 1860 near a pile of stones in Ohio. Cyrus Gordon, the guy from Smithsonian, studied that as well. He said it was a mezuzah from the ancient Middle East. Now, there's a Cherokee chief of the present day. Her name's Beverly Northrup. Is it a man? He said this group of Jews was known as the Sicarii, and during their fight with Rome, the Sicarii took refuge at Mazada, which is near the southwestern shoreline of the Dead Sea. The Roman general advanced and kept these people from having an easy escape route. In Josephus's writing, they report that the Sicarii were able to flee Egypt. Most of them went to Cyrene, which is that ancient Libyan colony. The story has been kept alive, they said, among our Cherokee people, that some of the Sicarii who escaped are some of our ancestors who managed to cross the ocean to this land and later became known as the Cherokees.
And of course, they would have brought their political slogans and beliefs with them.
Well, it's like that's why they ended up in this foreign land, is because of this revolution.
Revolt.
Like it just would have been part of their identity. And then we go into this huge section at the end, and I don't know if I have time for this, but in a nutshell, all of the Cherokee rituals, celebrations, festivals, traditions are mirrored in Judaism. Like it's the same thing.
That's crazy.
So
when you think about it, that's absolutely incredible.
The Cherokee start of the new year on the first new moon of the first new month is Tishri in the Hebrew calendar. The Brooklyn Jew, as well as the Oklahoma Cherokee, for them it falls on the same time. It's sometime between September the 5th and October the 5th. They both celebrate it in the same time. Ever since the Second Temple, this date inaugurates the Day of Awe, the Day of Repentance, and it ushers in the most holiday-intensive period of the year. Same for the Jews, same for the Cherokee. According to 1st century CE Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria, an old name for Rosh Hashanah, head of the year, is the day of the sacred moon. In Cherokee, this holiday is called the Great New Moon Festival. It's the same thing. In both cultures, the New Year is followed after exactly 8 days by a second holy day considered the most important, Yom Kippur, for the Jewish faith, the Day of Atonement. And the Cherokee religion, it has the approximate same name. Like in Cherokee, it translates to the Day of Atonement as well. Both follow the New Year by a week. And then he just goes through all these links. Like during Rosh Hashanah, devout Jews, they eat tongue. Like they might eat the tongue of a bull, and it symbolizes the head of the year. On the Cherokee New Year, the hunters present the tongue of the first killed buck to the chief of the tribe. Same thing. On the afternoon of Rosh Hashanah, the Jews observe tashlik, or casting away. It's a ritual of going into water and casting away your sins. The Cherokees, same thing. 2 hours before sunset, everyone goes into the water, and they actually, I think, shed.
I'm losing it.
Just cough. I don't care. Just cough. He's gone. Every time I talk about the Jays, he has a breakdown. He's getting upset. Every time I talk about him, he's like, well, I'm going to get out of here. Aaron, why do you react this way? I find it incredibly offensive. The Cherokees, they basically let their clothes go into the river to symbolize the same thing, the shedding of sins. The Cherokees fast on their day of cementation, similar to the Jewish feast of Gedaliah. The Cherokee Day of Cementation is marked by a 24-hour fast, which is the same as the Cherokees. So there's all these examples. The Cherokee ancient hymn is sung as Yehovah, and it's strikingly similar to the practice of invoking the name of Jehovah, Yehovah. It's the same thing. And the Cherokees, when they sing this, they say it's sung in the old language. It's the old term, the old name. So there's tons of examples. I won't go, he's back now.
Yeah, thanks for throwing me under the bus, saying that,
Why is it whenever I mention some Jewish tradition, you start convulsing and nearly die?
It is a bit weird that I haven't been coughing at all today, and then all of a sudden, I think it's the air conditioning, but I don't know.
The air conditioning. Right. And then he mentions Hebrew priests in the Temple of Jerusalem. They had crystals around their neck for some particular purpose, because it was like the perfect light crystals. They carried them on their breastplates. Cherokee priests also wear crystals that they carry around their necks, and they have them for solemn occasions as well. So I was going through all these connections, all these festivals that are the same. The Cherokees and the Jewish traditions seem to be echoes of each other. Can we use this to date anything? Like, can you actually say, okay, well, this particular Jewish celebration is only so many years old? And you actually can. He points out that Hanukkah is pretty new, like relatively new. That wasn't celebrated until 145 BCE. It appeared in Palestine. And the Cherokees don't do this. Now, 145 BCE puts the likely arrival of Jews among the Cherokees before the 2nd century BCE, and this matches with our time frame, because remember, they left Egypt in 231 BCE. So it came later. It came after they left. And then you get into even more evidence. This one's called the Possum Stone, the Possum Creek Stone. This was found in January of 1975.
Is this Hebrew as well?
Well, when they first found this, they just thought it was random squiggles on it. It's like it's got 4 eroded symbols on it, 3.5 to 6 inches tall, and it's a 5-foot long stone. I've got another photo of it here as well. And people thought it was a script for years, but Barry Fell got hold of it, that Kiwi guy, and it ended up being passed to I remember her name, Gloria Farley. She was another academic that actually studied it. She did a huge book on it. She linked this to East Mediterranean syllabaries So it's got that connection back to the old world. But she stopped short of translating it. She
Why?
had a few attempts, but they just didn't have a good understanding of this ancient script. Like they had an attempt, like she read it as so ni we sa, and then Brian Wilkes, another academic, translated it as ki ni we sa. But none of these made sense in Cherokee, right, in the Cherokee language. But along comes Yates, the author of this book, and he's like, let me have a go at it. Let's see what I can come up with. Let me first check if it's Greek. And it turns out
isn't it?
it's honi kasa, which in Greek says this is the one who has taken the prize of victory. And what it's actually on, it's an inscription on what would essentially be not like, it's almost like a medal of the ancient Olympic Games. It's like a pedestal of the winner of a game, of a particular victory. And in his book, he has these chapters on the connections between ancient games played by the ancient Greeks and the Cherokee, which I won't go into, but there's some weird connections there. And so there's an example in a Greek National Museum that comes from Athens, which basically looks exactly like this and has a similar inscription in a more modern Greek that says the same thing. This is the one who has taken the prize of victory. So some ancient Cherokee dude
Just happens to know Greek.
kicked ass in javelin, won the prize, and it was inscribed in this ancient Greek.
If anything, this kind of stuff, even though, as you pointed out rightly so, is highly controversial, it continues to demonstrate that our modern understanding of the movements of populations and just how sophisticated the ancient world was is greatly misunderstood.
Totally. And he points out that even today, academics are warned against discussing any kind of written language in the Americas before, the 15th century, i.e. before Columbus and the like
So
came to the Americas.
perhaps it wasn't included in the book, but why is this controversial? Would Cherokee people find it offensive if their legends would, because this is still their legends, right? They're just being perhaps interpreted in a new light.
He says it's all politics. Like
I
it's
see.
it's just all woke politics. I mean, that's basically why, because it's racist and you can't. I mean,
How is it racist?
what they say is that, well, if you say this, you're saying that the ancient Cherokee weren't actually Native American, that all this stuff came from Europeans. It's like, well, who cares?
Who cares?
If
we
that's
all
true,
came out
who
of Africa,
cares?
apparently. So what difference does it make?
Well, that's definitely bullshit.
Well, we came out of Australia.
Well, that's definitely bullshit too. But ultimately, does this help us understand this question on the ATIP program and the fact that all these military personnel who had injuries from UFOs and who had remote viewing abilities were all Cherokee?
No, it was incredibly fascinating. I'm so amazed by this. I think it's really intriguing, apart from the coughing induction. It's incredible. It doesn't answer what this has anything to do with Cherokee people being attacked by UFOs.
Correct. It does not.
So where did you end up? That's it.
Right here. I still don't understand it. I don't understand this connection between Cherokee. Like, I understand Cherokees better now. I understand their origins and their history and that they're pretty mysterious.
Well, I alluded to it before. Jewish space lasers. There's some space program going on that we don't know about. That's what's happening.
Well, it just seems that UFOs are coming down and interacting with ancient Jews in America.
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, if people can't get the joke, it's a trope, right? But it suggests, you're absolutely right, that they're targeting a specific group of people. So what you would need to do is you actually would need to dig deeper into possibly, more Greek. Maybe we look into Greek history to see if there's connections with sky people. Where did the Greeks come from? Or do we go even further, look into the ancient Hebrews? Do they have stories of sky people? Is that what's going on?
Well, I was looking into the Free study.
What's that?
It was that one that had Mary Rodwell on it from years ago. But they did a big survey of contactees. They don't like to say abductees. They like to say contactees. But basically people who had interactions with so-called ETs and UFOs. And they did big surveys on their experiences and their backgrounds. And I tried to find if they did anything on genealogy, if they did anything on DNA and heritage. I don't know if they did. I don't think they did. But that would be a good place to look. Is there some genetic link with people who are abducted? Now, one thing that did come to mind is that, I mean, what is clear about Cherokee is that they are mixed. They are very mixed people. Okay, so we can trace their origins back to ancient Egypt and this colony in Libya, and there's a Jewish population that came over. But the whole point is, when they came to the Americas, they absolutely interbred with other native tribes that were here.
Of course they would have, yes.
And so
they're human beings.
Their makeup today is also obviously heavily mixed with Europeans. So you're just talking about a very mixed people. Now, one thing with UFO abductions, what's one of the very earliest UFO abductions you can think of?
Betty and Barney Hill.
Betty and Barney Hill.
Straight away.
A mixed race couple. What's another location on our planet that is heavily involved with UFO encounters? And in fact, it was mentioned in Elizondo's book on the Plus Show with that general from this South American country talking to him about these UFO encounters.
Brazil.
The Brazilian population is also heavily racially mixed. So is there something about the mixed racial component that is an attribute to this attention from these UFOs?
That's the only question.
That's actually the only thing I can come up with. I can't come up with any other idea. If someone's listening and they've got a better idea, help me out. I don't know if that's true. I don't know what that means, but this is all I got. I can't figure out what this means when he says that all these people that have these encounters with UFOs have Cherokee blood. I can't figure it out.
In spite of what you just threw this at me. So you're telling us, Ben, from this that they're essentially the chosen people. Chosen by whom is very different. But
they're not, though, because they have just some Jewish ancestry, but the whole point is that they're
heavily mixed.
Heavily mixed now.
I think you're onto something. In light of what we hear about the modern hybrid program and the program itself, which starts moving out of these more, even though controversial, but academic circles, and starts moving into essentially the law surrounding aliens. But you're probably onto something there. It's like something to do with their hybridization, their gene mixing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because think about what is the program.
It's ultimately hybridization.
It's hybridization. It's trying to figure out how to merge some other foreign DNA with the DNA of human beings. And perhaps they're looking at already mixed populations to see how that composition works.
Or, I know I was making jokes before about Crazy Bear or whatever else, but this whole idea, if you look into some of these stories, right, there are these very, very old stories, allegedly. Okay, so who knows if it's not just someone who's made this up. But there are stories of ancient peoples describing the dropping off of people from some type of skycraft, right? Sky people, essentially. And then Artie 6 Killer Clark actually has a book on the sky people. I wasn't referencing her work, but it just occurred to me, of course. She's got works on the sky people. They're dropped off essentially out of craft, right? Of some type of glowing saucer or some type of glowing thing in the sky. So some of the stories that I've heard, though, are that essentially they've dropped people off to interbreed them as an early form of the hybrid program. So is that what this is?
That's an interesting idea. I mean, we should probably go back to 6 Killer.
I love her work. Yeah,
books.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I can't remember if there's mentions of Cherokee. I've got a feeling it's not.
I've
got a feeling it's other tribes. But maybe we'll link to that in the show notes as well. But that brings me to the end of my research. Happy to answer all your questions you had about the whole Cherokee mystery. Glad we got to the bottom of it.
We didn't get any closer to it at all.
Glad we solved it for you. Coming up in our Plus extension, jelly creatures, demon clouds.
Demon clouds that follow you home in the back of your car.
Hippo hybrid rapists.
Well, we might not go into that one.
Oh, okay.
I might just briefly mention it at the start. But yes, we'll go. Yeah. Bit controversial, this show. But we'll go into...
That's funny. I mentioned the Jews and you start coughing. You mentioned... Look, you did it again. You mentioned the hippo-headed rapists and I start coughing. It's weird what we react to.
This is not fair. It is a weird coincidence, but I genuinely am just getting over this stupid cold that we've both had for weeks on end. You can hear it in my voice. You can hear it from the start of the show. It has nothing to do with...
What if I just say gefilte fish? Nothing? He just coughs. A little cough, a little baby cough comes out.
Holding it in.
For gefilte fish. That's a wrap for this show. Thank you so much for listening and watching, of course. Make sure you hit like and subscribe if you're watching the video and you made it this far. And if you're on Plus, tons of stuff coming up. We've got these amazing stories, some really fun stuff like the Blob hitchhiker. The
Cloud.
The Cloud
Demon
hitchhiker.
Cloud.
Demon Clouds. I want to hear about that. Amazing stuff. Head to mysteriousuniverse.org/plus and sign up today if you aren't already a member. You get access to the big extensions we do on these shows every single week, more than an hour, usually on these extensions. And you get an entirely exclusive show that comes out every Tuesday as well. You see you're getting more than double the content when you sign up for Plus. Sign up for MU Max and get access to our massive back catalogue as well. And of course, all the video and audio is on our website at mysteriousuniverse.org. mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. Sign up today. Help support your favorite show. That's a wrap for this free edition of MU. Thanks for listening. If you're on Plus, stick around for the good stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.